Story number 1. Hide and go seek inside abandoned mansion. Halloween. It should be a time for trick or treating, dressing up as your favorite superheroes, and going out to parties. While that perfectly describes 95% of people, my adventure on Halloween was a bit different. Different in that I was almost taken out. And I don't mean taken out on a date. Let's go back to the early 2000s. I was in high school, and my friend Kevin and I had been bored one Halloween afternoon. Most of our friends were going out to parties, but we were the kids who preferred being away from such nonsense. At least, nonsense in our eyes. Therefore, we had come up with the idea of checking out this abandoned mansion that had been left empty since the 1990s. It was a bit out of the way of our small Pennsylvania town, but we thought, what better way to spend Halloween? After all, it had been quite popular with urban explorers, and it was said to be haunted. Though this experience has nothing to do with the paranormal, it still gave us the chills, and you'll soon find out why. Anyways, we ended up searching for the location, and later that evening, we make the 30-minute bicycle ride over. Before approaching, we did start to get a really bad feeling. While we rode in the woods, we saw a bunch of creepy graffiti on rocks and cult-like symbols carved into the trees. Bear in mind, this isn't a part of the countryside that was well known for criminal activity. Now, I know looking back, this was a terrible idea, but being naive teenagers, we thought we were unstoppable. So we arrived, and just like we expected, the place looked empty. I'll describe the building. It was 2 stories, around 10 rooms in total. The front yard was overgrown with a bunch of trash and debris everywhere. Vines and foliage were taking over the walls and windows. And on the front porch, there were a bunch of do not trespass and private property signs. We ignored these signs and entered anyway, calling out to any potential inhabitants. Hello? Is anyone here? We called out, only to be met with silence. It's now we begin making our way into the rooms. First room we enter looks to be like one of a child. There was an abandoned crib and some pretty creepy looking dolls. And on the walls was wallpaper that featured clowns and various other carnival animals, such as lions and elephants. After that, we move on to the kitchen. Except something about this kitchen spelled all bad. There was even more graffiti, with needles lying everywhere. We had to be careful with our steps as they looked used. And on top of that, there were about 10 kitchen knives stuck on the wall. I then remember my friend opening a drawer and finding a bunch of bugs. It was creepy. From here, we continue to make our way room after room, and we find various debris and more creepy graffiti and symbols. However, one room on the second floor was where a creepy night would become worse. As we're walking down the hallway, we happen to look out the upstairs window, just in time to see the sunset. Well, on top of that sunset, we ended up seeing what looked like an early 1990s Plymouth Voyager making its way to the mansion with a purpose. We then watch as 2 men in typical street clothing exit the car with rifles. I would describe them as pretty young, no older than 30. One had a bald head and beard, the other had long hair and a light stubble. This sent chills down our spine. Why would they need to be armed? Both my friend and I look at each other as one of them fires at the mailbox. We jump to cover as another shot is heard breaking one of the glass windows a mere few feet away from our face. Our number one concern is that we were spotted. The chase to get out begins, though with there only being one staircase, we had to go back the way we came from. Thus, we army crawl our way to the stairs as we feared we would have been spotted from the windows. Once we were at the staircase, we began to hear the 2 from outside talking and laughing, with random shots in between. Now, the more we pay attention, the more we notice that their footsteps are coming closer. Going down the stairs was now a no-go. We had to hide. But where? Time was running out, and we chose to go into what appeared to be a master bedroom, but locking the door was out of the question, seeing as it was missing. Thus, we chose to hide in a closet. Good thing we did, because moments later, we can hear the 2 enter the room. As my friend and I are watching, both of them take out some soda cans from their backpack, then they place them on the window. They then back up and started to fire. It was now obvious that perhaps these two weren't looking for both my friend and I, but instead, they were looking to do target practice. However, out of all times, my allergies chose to act up. The dust in the closet causes me to sneeze. The two immediately stop laughing and firing. Then they point their rifles to the closet. Oh, great. I just caused our early demise, I remember thinking in my head.
Who's in there? Come out right now, or we're going to start shooting.
What other choice did we have? Slowly, we open the closet door and we make our way out with our hands up.
You two do know this is private property, right?
We apologize profusely and we're basically on the verge of tears.
What do you think we should do? I don't think anybody would notice them if they went missing. Let's take them out back.
One of them more or less says. I then remember them whisper before the bald one tells us to sit down with our backs turned. This was it. The end. Moments later, I feel the barrel touch my back, but then it backs away. Then, we hear two loud bangs, except instead of firing at me, they fire at a window, causing it to shatter. It's now they tell us we can look, and both are just laughing.
Come on, you two. Did you really think we were that evil? These are airsoft. Relax. My buddy and I like to come here on the weekends and have target practice.
Though you would think this was the part we join in on the laughter, there was no laughing matter. My friend had a panic attack and I was crying like a baby. They apologized, saying we were more than welcome to join them, but instead, we chose to leave. Wise choice. We exit the mansion, get on our bicycles, and we get out of there. So, that was the night my friend and I almost met our doom to some college kids having their version of fun. Side note, a lot of people tell me that you would need a pretty powerful airsoft round to break glass. Either that, or they were lying about them being airsoft. Either way, it's scary to think that had they accidentally hit either my friend or myself, they could have caused some serious damage. Story number 2, Home Alone on Halloween. How can I forget the time something scary happened to me on Halloween? No, I'm not talking about going to a haunted house or going through one of those creepy mazes. Instead, I'm talking about a time I was home alone on Halloween. For context, I'm female, I was 17 years old, and this was around 2010. So, my parents had been away for the evening as they were celebrating their wedding anniversary, and they wouldn't be back until the next afternoon. But that was okay with me, seeing as I wasn't going to school the next morning. Now, unfortunately, I had procrastinated on a paper, which meant I had to spend the entire night working on it, seeing as it was due that evening at midnight. Seriously, teachers, why you gotta make an assignment due on Halloween? To be fair, I'd already requested an extension on it, and I knew I wasn't going to get another. Anyways, since I still wanted to be part of the Halloween celebrations, I'd bought a whole bunch of candy to pass out to kids. I even dressed up as Wonder Woman, seeing as she's my favorite superhero. Thus, I sat on the front porch with some candles on, and I had a plastic pumpkin filled to the brim with various sweets. I sat there on my laptop, working for about 3 hours, from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. The night proceeds to go by very fast, but not many families did show up. By the time I was going back into my house, the plastic pumpkin was still half full. Well, I got up and put my laptop inside. Then I returned to grab the pumpkin and blow out the candles. Out of nowhere, I see somebody dressed up as a burglar with a ski mask. I actually had to do a double take, thinking that they were the real deal. They were pretty tall, but it was Halloween, so I thought I was being paranoid.
Trick or treat. Smell my feet. Give me something good to eat.
Seriously, he said that, and how I remember, I have no clue. It was pretty lame, but for some reason, I did recognize his voice. I just couldn't really think who it was. Anyways, I did find it sort of off putting, but I give him the benefit of the doubt. Here, go ahead and grab as much candy as you want. I'm practically giving it away. He grabs some candy, but before leaving, he says,
Where are your parents? Are you the only one here?
Yes, it's just me. My parents are out for the weekend, but it's nice. If I could go back in time and slap myself silly for telling this stranger I was home alone, trust me, I would. But I love Halloween, and the last thing I was thinking about was someone taking advantage of that knowledge. He then bids me a good night, and I soon forget about him. Fast forward about 30 minutes, and I'm just stepping out of the shower. With some music playing softly on my iPod, I soon became aware of what sounds like a window being opened. Just so you know, our home is really old, and everything, and I mean everything, will make noise. The wooden floors, the squeaky doors, and even the windows. That was confusing. Only way a window would open is if my parents had arrived, but I had just talked to them before I stepped into the shower. So I make my way out of the restroom and I take a peek down the hallway. I kid you not, I catch the glimpse of a masked man with a machete entering the living room. I froze. This wasn't my parents, but a home intruder. I knew now I had to get to my room, but the only way up there was up the squeaky staircase. He would have easily heard me, but what other choice did I have? My cell phone was up there charging, and it's not like we have a landline to call for help. I guess I could have run out of the house, but dumb me didn't think of that. Now, if there was one good thing going for me, it was my dad's revolver he kept in his dresser. If I could grab that, and my cell phone, I could lock myself in the room, and I could be safe. Sounded like a good plan. With nothing but my bathrobe on, I sneak as fast as I could up the steps, as I dreaded the sound of squeaking. Finally, in my room, I grab my cell phone, and I make a mad dash toward my parents' room. It's now I lock the door as I begin to hear footsteps begin to make their way up. Hello? I need police. Someone's in my house, and they have a machete. Okay, try to relax. We're sending officers at this very moment. Can you lock yourself in a room and try to put as much as you can between yourself and the burglar? I had already done so by pushing an old chair against the door handle. Now, I guess I should mention, but my parents' door isn't exactly that strong. The lock mechanism has a tendency of not closing itself properly, which meant that if you tried enough, the door could be opened. So I'm in there on the verge of crying when all of a sudden I can see the door handle move. I froze and I started to sweat, but I knew that if he broke in, I would have a surprise waiting. This was something I discussed with the dispatch lady. She told me that if he entered, it was okay to defend myself. The door handle shakes for about 10 seconds before the burglar started to kick at the door. The kicking was so strong that the chair moves and the door creaks open. My heart sank when the identity of the home intruder turns out to be the same person in costume that I had seen less than an hour ago.
Don't cry, Erica. You're going to be fine. I won't hurt you as long as you do as I say.
Something then clicks in my mind, and I recognize that voice as the same one from earlier. Scared, I reveal the revolver, and he freezes. Then he says,
Surprise! This thing's just a toy. Seriously, you can put that thing away now.
he was the one that was scared. I tell him to leave, and he does. But that's not before I hear officers yelling. I look out the window, and sure enough, officers had arrived just in time, and they have him laying on the ground as one of the officers puts him in handcuffs. Hey, I'm over here. That's the man who broke into my house. I shout from my window. Do you mind stepping outside so we can have a word with you? One of the officers replies back. So I go out there and I get the chills when they unmask this creep. It was an old customer from the coffee shop I work at, had filed a restraining order a month ago after he'd been stalking and broke into my car. Once I told the officers this information, he is taken into custody. So that was pretty much the night. I soon called my aunt, and she picked me up, where I would spend the night at her place. Story number 4: Halloween Store Mishaps. I used to work at a Halloween store back in 2014 when I was 17 years old. It was just a part-time job since I was trying to save up to buy myself a used car. I worked there from August to November. The first couple of weeks were pretty slow, and all I really did was cashier work. On the occasion, I would work in the back, but for the most part, you would find me helping customers and checking them out. Pretty basic. One late September evening, the store had been pretty empty, and it's just me and a couple of other coworkers. We were about 15 minutes before store closing, and I was out in front changing the trash can. While I had my back turned, somebody called out to me. I remember him saying something so bizarre that I was like, wait, what? It was something like this.
Hey, you mind if I get in some of that action? That's hot.
My best guess was he was referring to my bum since I was bending over. Sorry, sir. I didn't understand what you said. I tell him. He looked clearly intoxicated, and I did my best to act like a good old customer service girl, although deep down, I knew something was up with this guy, which, to quickly give you a visual, he looked like a typical homeless dude.
Hi there. Do you want to go to my car? You can see all the candy I have.
I already knew this guy was bad news, so I turned my back and head into the store, where I tell my fellow coworkers, just so you know, there's this weird guy roaming around. Do you think we should call the police? I say with confusion. We all look out the window, and he appears to be stumbling away. Still, we figured it would be a good idea to let an officer know, as he could have been a danger to himself or someone else. Rest assured, they advised us they would have somebody check him out. Cool. So it's official. It was then finally closing time. Time to lock the front door. I head over there as my coworkers are picking up the mess down the aisles when guess who enters and returns? Mr. Creep Guy. Except now, he has a large knife.
I came to pick you up. Let's go, sweetie. Our fun is waiting.
Hearing those words sent chills down my spine, but I knew this guy was dangerous when he started to push displays around and went on about how he wanted to slice me up. I book it screaming at my friends to get into the back room. They didn't realize what was happening until they can see me being chased. Bear in mind, we're all female, with the oldest being 19 years old, around 5'5". This guy was easily over 6 foot, 230 to 250 pounds. Thus, we each book it into the back room, where we now hit the alarm and lock the door. This was the first time I'd ever heard said alarm, and that thing was loud. Even with the alarm, the guy was out of it, and he began to kick and scream, trying to make his way in. We watched from the little glass window as he punched the glass with his fists, leaving behind a red imprint from his bruised knuckles. After what seemed like an eternity, we watch him exit the store, and finally an officer does show up 10 minutes later, but by then, the creep is long gone. Thankfully, this story does have a happy ending. Our security cameras did catch him in the action, and after a couple of days, they are able to find him. And that was the only time something really scary like that took place. I did get the occasional creep that wanted to go out with me, but luckily, nothing could compare to that very scary evening. Story number 4. Almost Abducted on Halloween Night. Back around 2007, on a Halloween night, myself and a friend of mine ended up going trick or treating. We were aged 14 and 15, respectively, and were both female. We lived in a relatively safe neighborhood in northern Texas, where the worst crime you would hear about is somebody throwing trash on the ground. So, nothing too crazy. Naturally, our first choice was to go hit up the homes in our immediate area and get as much candy as we could. And let me tell you, we sure did. After about an hour, we decided to take the bus and go to the other side of town. There was one neighborhood in particular that was very popular, and it featured a haunted house and even gave full-size chocolate bars. That family was very rich. Of course, we made sure to tell our parents to pick us up over there, and surprisingly, they were okay with it. I guess this was during a time when our parents were a little bit more trusting. I digress. The bus ride there would take about 20 minutes in total, and the first few stops did have some other teenagers walk on in costume, so we didn't feel as awkward. However, even while my friend and I sat conversing, we couldn't help but notice this guy who kept staring at us. I would describe him as in his late 30s, scrawny with long hair and ripped up shirt and jeans. He was around, I'd say, 5'11", 150 pounds. We didn't really care since it's Halloween, but something about his eyes spelled bad intentions. We try our best to ignore him, and eventually we arrived at the bus stop and we began walking toward the haunted house. It was about a 10-minute walk down some pretty quiet streets. At least, it should have been quiet, if it weren't for the fact that we realized we were being followed by the creepy man who had been staring at both my friend and I on the bus ride over. We thought maybe this was his stop too, but to test this idea, we slowed down, and he does the same thing. It was starting to get a bit suspicious, and it didn't help that he was on his phone, appearing to be communicating with someone. Sadly, in order to get to the neighborhood that featured the haunted house, we had to walk down a street of homes that was bland and boring, and there were no lights. Seriously, no Halloween decorations, or no signs of people. So it's not like we could have walked up to a group of trick or treaters and gotten help. Anyways, we're about halfway down this block, and we've noticed the stranger is gone. We do breathe a sigh of relief, and we tell ourselves we were being overly paranoid over something so mundane. This would change when, while we stood there looking for him, we saw a dirty old van slowly make its way down the street with its headlights off. Thinking nothing of it, we start to walk, but then in my peripheral vision, I can see the van is keeping pace. Finally, it's within reaching distance. I kid you not. In one quick action, we hear a side door open, and I feel a hand grab my arm. Those moments went by in slow motion. I turn toward the door, and I can see the same creep who had been following both of us minutes prior was now trying to pull me in. His grasp must have been lacking because I'm able to slip away. That's when we take off running, screaming like our lives depended on it, which they pretty much did. Anyways, we reach the corner of this street, and finally, we're able to see some adults and fellow trick or treaters. We scream for their help, and we now watch as the van slowly drives away, never to be seen again. Now, the family we talked to was pretty surprised when we told them about the attempted abduction. Thus, they called the police, and when they arrive, we try to give them as many details as we could. To this day, the identity of the creep, as well as the one driving in the van, remain unsolved. Story number 5. Held Up on Halloween Night. It was Halloween night 2009. For quick mention, I'm male, and I was 22 years old. At the time, I was working at a small mom and pop coffee shop, and I just got off of work, excited to finally get some rest. I wasn't going out that night, unlike most of my friends, since I just worked an 8-hour shift. But I was going to pass out some candy, and I did tell my friends they were more than welcome to stop by and say hello. Before heading home, however, I went to a nearby 7-Eleven to pick up some snacks, seeing as I was pretty lazy to make anything. I walk in and I'm welcomed with the same familiar cashier that works there anytime I go. Hey, good to see you. You here to pick up the usual? He says. I tell him, sure, and he grabs me a hot dog while I go to the back to grab myself a soft drink and some chips. I wasn't exactly sure what drink I wanted, but as I'm choosing from the selection, my cell phone started to ring. It was my girlfriend. I tell her that I was at 7-Eleven and I wanted to know if she wanted anything. She said she was fine, so I go ahead and speak to her while I now go to grab some chips. Here's where something bizarre happens. From the aisle of chips, I am able to see the front entrance of the 7-Eleven, including the front counter. What I saw were two men in masks enter with their hands in their pockets. One was wearing a Jason hockey mask, the other was wearing the mask from Scream. I look at them and I joke to my girlfriend that the store was being robbed by some Halloween bad guys. Little did I know that was about to become a reality. As I walk over to pay for my food, the two reveal that they were armed. They then yell for both myself and the cashier to remain quiet while they took out money from the cash register. My girlfriend was so scared since she couldn't see what was happening, and I try to tell her more details, but one of the robbers tells me to give him my phone. Reluctantly, I ended up doing that, and he throws it against the window, causing the phone to shatter.
Do you have a wallet or any other valuables on you? If you lie to me, don't blame me for what I do to you.
One of them says, as he has this sidearm pointed toward my face. I didn't have my wallet, as that was in my car, but I did have a $50 bill and my fossil watch my dad had gotten me for my 21st birthday. Nervously, I hand it over, and he walks back to his partner as they continue to take money from the cash register.
Do you have a safe with more money? Answer the question.
The cashier then points below him as one of them literally dives over the countertop. The robber then proceeds to grab a hold of the small safe and brings it out. Bear in mind, I'm there shaking, on the verge of having a full on meltdown, but after about 3 minutes of intensity, both of the burglars run out of the store before they get into a minivan and they drive away. It's at this moment the cashier hits the alarm and we both run into the back room where officers would soon arrive. The store was a mess, and the officers, rightfully so, questioned both myself and the cashier as we described the two robbers. Now, since I had no phone, I called my girlfriend using the store phone, and she was crying, saying she thought something terrible had happened. I reassure her I was safe, and she makes the 15-minute drive to the 7-Eleven just to see me. And after what seemed like an endless night of questioning and possibly being another statistic, we finally head back to my apartment. And so, that was the end to one of the scariest Halloweens of my life. Story number 6. Open the door. I need help. Why is it that when you try to be nice and do a good deed, it always ends up biting you in the rear end? That's something I really want the answer to, but I know I'll never get it. What am I rambling about? I'm rambling about 2 Halloweens ago when I was 16 years old and staying at home on my own. Though I was by myself that evening, I would keep myself occupied by passing out candy and working on my homework. Spoiler alert, I never did the homework, and I only gave out candy for 30 minutes. I instead chose to head over to my buddy's house, who was throwing a Halloween party. Nothing too crazy, but I did end up heading back to my place at around midnight. Tired, but ready to enjoy the weekend, I put on some pajamas and head upstairs to play some video games. This goes on for roughly an hour, and eventually I go downstairs to grab a glass of water. Here's when something happens that sends a chill down my spine. Knocking at the front door. I ignored the knocking, thinking it might be some late night trick or treaters, but the more I listened, the more the knocking sounded desperate. I walk over expecting to see some kids pulling a prank, but when I look through the peephole, it's this man in a hoodie. I'm sorry, but I don't have any candy to pass out. You have yourself a good evening. I know, I shouldn't have responded, considering I was home alone, but I was pretty tired and not thinking straight.
You need to help me. I'm hurting pretty bad here. My arm. Please. I need help.
Okay, give me a minute. I'll go call an ambulance for you. Just wait.
No. I need to go inside your house. This is important. You have to let me in.
At this moment, I was considering opening the door, but something about this was very suspicious. For one, he stood there absolutely normal. He wasn't hunched over, nor was he appearing to hold his arms in pain. In fact, He kept knocking at my door using both arms. Let me get this straight. If your arm's in pain, you're not going to be knocking heavily, are you? If you answered no, then yes, you're correct. I keep telling him I could call the police or an ambulance, but he keeps saying that he needed to get inside the house and call himself. Just the fact he didn't want me calling police finally clicked a check mark in my head, telling me this guy wasn't telling me the truth. I told him I was calling police anyways, and this sends him into a frenzy. I watch from the peephole as he backs up and then starts throwing himself at the door with all his weight. This guy was insane. I grab my cell phone and get on the line with police as I run to the windows and doors, making sure they were locked and secure. When I make my way over to the kitchen, I'm even able to see him hopping over our little side door fence from the window. He then runs to the back kitchen door, and I watch from the little window in the door as he throws himself against it. I got the chills as I grab a kitchen knife, and I'm preparing for this maniac to break in at any moment. He finally gives up after 30 seconds, and I watch him hop over my backyard fence. When police arrive, I give them a description, but he was never found. He could have just been some guy who had too much to drink that night, or he could have had other intentions. But I guess I'll never know since I've never seen him again. Story number 7. Last minute Halloween shopping. This didn't take place on Halloween, but it did take place a couple of days before, and it does have to do with the holiday. So I'm pretty busy. I work for an insurance firm and I work 40 hours, sometimes more, due to overtime. I mention these details because I had procrastinated on buying decorations and candy to pass out at kids. Actually, I was off on Halloween and I wanted to finally do something fun for the kiddos. Thus, when I got off of work, I head to a local Target to pick up some decorations and some candy and chocolate. I actually took longer than expected, since I was also doing my grocery shopping for the week. When I was done, it was close to 9 p.m., and I was heading back to my car to head home. I opened the back door, and one by one, I started putting the groceries in while I was talking to my sister on the phone. As I had my back turned, I heard somebody talking. Hey, sis, can you give me a minute? I think somebody's trying to grab my attention. Sure, no problem. I'll wait. Good evening, sir. Was there something I could help you with? It was a homeless man, and I assumed he wanted some change. I was feeling generous, so I reach into my pocket and give him a $5 bill. He accepts it, and he says thank you, and I assume he was going to leave, as I return to putting the remainder of my groceries in my car. Oh, you're still there. Was there something else I could do for you? He just stood staring me up and down, not saying a single word. I thought maybe he wasn't all there, so I now moved the shopping cart away and head to the driver's door. However, before I could close it, he puts his hand on the door, and then he says,
Why are you so pretty? Can I go with you? Please?
the way he said it was so weird, but I was able to close the door and put the key in the ignition. But the dude jumps in front of me, and he starts flailing his arms around, banging on the hood of my car. It was really weird, and it's now I began to realize this guy was on something. So I couldn't go forward, since I didn't want to hit him, so I reverse. He then runs over to the back, and he begins yelling and hitting the bumper, then the back window. He actually caused a crack to form, but after a back and forth game, I leave as he chases me down. I know it's not as creepy as other stories, but when I went to that same Target a couple of weeks later, I was doing some shopping. All was well, until I heard a bunch of commotion and screaming. About 20 seconds later, 3 security guards run past me, and all the customers, including myself, went to see what was happening. And sure enough, they had some dude restrained on the ground. What was creepy was 2 things. For one, there was a large kitchen knife laying on the ground next to him. Presumably, he had been holding it. And two, he was the same guy who had been trying to get into my car a couple of nights before Halloween. He was taken away, but not before screaming and yelling all these different incoherent things. So there you have it. Creepy dude interrupting me during my Halloween shopping, only to return into my life a couple of weeks later. but luckily, he was stopped that night before he could do anything to somebody.